Do you like servers? I know I like servers too. And today we're going to be putting together a really cool server. And we should have some good performance on it as well. Good processors? Check. Good RAM? Check. 14 terabyte hard drives and lots of them? Check. Let's get this opened up. Oh boy. So they did send caddies also, which is pretty nice. So far looking pretty good here. All right. Ta-da! An R730XD. Let's open it up. Ooh, it's clean. Ooh, it smells good also. That's welcome. We have our fan wall here. Let's just check out and make sure that this is nicely functional. Looks great. Oh, this is super clean on the inside also. Can you get closer and get inside here? This looks really, really nice. It came with two 10 gigabit NICs also, 57,800 RNDC. These are network daughter cards, and this is basically a network NIC. In the back, you have, it doesn't look like include those caddies, but these are 2.5-inch drives. They're both SAS, and that'll give us some really good performance. They included the heat sinks, awesome. And I've got the GPU power, so there's 8-pin power connectors here. I already have a bunch of these. So if I did want to add in a GPU or something like that, could totally do it here in this. There is also a mid plane that you can get that allows for 4 additional hard drives. Looks like we've got quite a clean system though. So really, really happy to see that. And yeah, let's get this sucker populated and tested. And always remember, you want to test your system outside of the rack. Before you rack it up, test your system, make sure it's all good, and then rack it up. That way, if there's a problem, you can easily troubleshoot it here instead of needing to slide it out, take the top off, all that stuff. So yeah, and I'm gonna start off by adding both of the CPUs to the system just to make sure that both of the sockets work. Maybe later I come back and remove one of them. If you can get by with just using CPU 1, then you don't have to deal with QPI, which can slow things down and kind of become a bottleneck. Granted, that's at a fairly high gigabit transfer speed on a V3, V4 system versus a V1 or V0 and V2 system like an Ivy Bridge, Sandy Bridge. Those were much, much slower QPI links that those had. As soon as I get one of these off, I don't like to waste time. I like to get the CPU in there as fast as possible so that I can close it back up. Quick inspection, make sure that I don't have any bent pins on this. It's good to look at a like kind of 45-degree angle, like straight down into the pins from each offset. And there's kind of 2 planes on the V4 CPUs. And that looks really good. 2696 V4, first one going in. And remember, your idle speeds are going to be the same across any of the CPUs. So if you're thinking, oh, I'll get one of the lower wattage CPUs, that will cap your top side. but your V4 CPUs are all going to idle at the same. Your topside performance wattage, however, can be lower. So keep that in mind if you're thinking about getting a different processor. All right, these look good. These are in good shape, no bent pins. And like I mentioned, you can check the full written guide at digitalspaceport.com or in the description below. Okay, nice. Came with two 750 watt PSUs also. So don't think you can use or reuse the kind of earlier R720 lineups PSUs in this. You're gonna have a green EPP on them, and dual 750s is perfect for this setup. Be sure when you're buying a server that might be a Dell server that it comes with its iDRAC license for the iDRAC Enterprise. You're not going to be able to really get that super easy elsewise. So this one did, and I made sure of it, have the iDRAC Enterprise, which gives you a lot of really cool functionality that you definitely want. One of the big reasons to get a server in the first place is so that you can utilize some really nice external BMC connectivity to it. And the iDRAC is by far one of my favorite. It is so simple. Get a little dab on each one of these in the center. Get the heat sinks back on here. So there's good reasons to just have one CPU installed, especially for a storage server running TrueNAS. You don't really need tremendous amounts of cores unless you're going to be installing pretty much like tremendous amounts of VMs and also Docker. If you're using this primarily for a storage head-in though, you do want to have a good fast single thread speed, and having two sockets populated on a Dell R730XD will lead to you using the QPI interlink. That allows you to use all of the PCIe Riser slots, and there are some different configurations, so do check out the manual. All of those things, of course, linked in the description below. But the difference that you're looking for is you would lose two PCIe Riser slots, and these are full slots, so you would want to balance that out. But if you did just run with one, you also would want to cover the slot with one of the official covers, not just something that is kind of makeshift. You would want to get one of the Dell covers. I've got that part linked down below so that you could just run with one socket. I actually don't have one of those. I am going to swap that out and run it with just one socket eventually. One socket makes it really easy to eliminate one potential bottleneck that you could face if you're looking at high performance transfers, which are going to be impacted by things like your single thread speed and your NUMA allocations. So if you are looking for a little bit of extra reference while you're in the field or in your garage data center, you can reference your memory population guidelines, which are outlined here. In a dual socket setup like we have here today, you're going to want to populate uniformly between socket 1 and socket 2 the RAM. If you just had one, then you can actually just populate for one socket and leave the other empty. But as you see, we've got white, black, and green handles. So this is going to be kind of your DIMMs per channel. But if you look at the number of channels, that's 4 slots. So you've got 4 channels of RAM, 4 per each one. So populating the white first, that's 4 total per processor. 8 if you had 2 processors would be your optimal arrangement. Don't worry, I've got more RAM. Oh, I've got more RAM. And I'll leave those 4 DIMMs until I get around to being able to populate them. I'm going to have to pull some RAM out of another system. I've got a terabyte sitting in one machine right now. So right now we've got this populated on the white. Always a good idea to check out all of them, of course. So if you can, try to populate them all. Just make sure you don't have any defects on your RAM channels. Pretty advisable. So when you're populating your tray that is Riser 1, it comes out completely, so you can put your thumbs kind of on the Riser 2, push down, and you'll see these blue outlines and finger holes pull up. This whole thing is built to come out like that. There is a latch right here. You want to be mindful of your card links here, and if you've got longer cards, put those towards the top. So we've got a SAS external HBA that we're going to be putting in. We've got our Intel Optane 900P that we're going to be putting in. And then we've got a 100 gigabit NIC that we'll be putting in. And since this is the smaller one, I'm going to put this in the bottom slot. Also keep in mind that you're looking at 8x on Gen 3 for the speed on each one of these slots. And after you have that put together, hopefully the back will close on yours. There are slots here that you need to be sure that you're checking to make sure that they're actually biting onto the card, because they will provide rear support so it doesn't sag. Go ahead and close that up. There's a lot of power in a little format, right? It's pretty cool. And now let me show you the card that is actually going to be used in our system. And I'm going to tell you about why this is important. So I just showed you how to use any card, and I've got a lot of ideas and recommendations for other cards that can fit, that I know can fit into an R730XD. So do check that out in the written guide at digitalspaceport.com. However, this card here is going to do something that you actually really need to have happen in a R720, 730, almost any Dell system that is a rack server, which seemingly lacks one thing you're gonna have to use a really valuable slot for, is a boot drive. And where do you put your boot drive? This is where you put your boot drive. And this is kind of special. It might look like your traditional NVMe card, however, it's not. This is actually a split card. It does have an NVMe on it. You could get one that just was purely a M.2 that was pure SATA, and that is what makes this actually so powerful. And that is because you have internal SATA headers inside your R730XD that you can plug into, and basically this is the power and this is the connection. It doesn't actually connect through the PCIe bus. That's big because your R730XD is going to be pretty restrictive of what you're allowed to boot from, and NVMe-based risers are not going to be something that's going to be super easy to boot from. However, this, no problem. Now, I like this one because it is, under $15, and it also has an extra slot. That extra slot allows you to put an NVMe in it that after you're booted up, you can definitely use. And that NVMe is where we'll be storing our Dockers and stuff like that, our VMs. That'll be kind of our pool for our applications to live on. So the way that you use this is you just plug this in to your little SATA connector here, and you need to get a SATA SSD that is not NVMe, and I've got specifically the ones I'm using linked below. Of course, for the NVMe, you're limited to Gen 3 speeds, so you could go even up to like an Evo 970 or something like that if you wanted to max out performance, but I've just got something random that I had laying around here that'll work good for the demonstration purposes. So this is what I'm actually going to be using in there. Let's get this tossed in, and then I'm going to show you where you plug it in to your system. This will be presented as a bootable drive. Again, that's huge. If you've ever, ran into this issue, this solves that issue, and it's a long-standing issue that a lot of people have expressed concerns about. How do I get a boot drive working without sacrificing one of my big bays or one of my good bays on a storage server? This is how. Get this popped in here. And you don't need to enable bifurcation support on this card because, like I mentioned, the power for the SATA drive is being supplied by this. However, the data transfer is not happening off of the PCIe bus for this. The data is actually coming through your traditional SATA cable. So once you route your cable, you can just put it up here at this plug and make sure you got the direction on it facing correctly. Just slide that in right there. Do not put your drives in until you get your system inside your rack or wherever it's going to be living. I'm assuming it's going to be living in a rack, because it is a lot of extra weight that you don't want to be negotiating with. And also, if something were to happen, like you drop this, at least it's just dropping this and not all your hard drives. So let's get this replaced. We're going to replace the R520 that I've got. It has horrible fans in it. working unit, but it has horrible fans in it, so I'm gonna pull that out. Luckily, the R520 rails work with an R730XD also, so I don't have to replace those rails. You can check all those parts in the guide that I've got on the website, digitalspaceport.com. And also a big shout out to all of our channel members who make this kind of ridiculousness possible. Let's get this racked. LXC100151, you are being repurposed. Welcome to the Digital Space Fleet. In my data center. And let's get to caddying, and we're done. From this screen, you can hit F10 to go into the lifecycle controller and set your IP address for your system. Make sure you have a network interface connection to the iDRAC port. And also, by the way, you can connect any keyboard and monitor to it. It doesn't need to be a kind of KVM setup like I've got here. But let's go to the system setup, advanced hardware setup. Then we can come over to our BIOS menu, which this is kind of the system setup. It's got BIOS, iDRAC, and device settings. And inside here, we can set up our network. And if you scroll down, you're gonna, of course, wanna make sure you have that enabled. Auto negotiations, probably what you want to have set here. Register the DRAC on DNS. That would show up like with this if you wanted that to show up on your router, which not a bad idea. And I've got IPv4 specified, and I've got a specific address set here, .122. Our static preferred DNS server and our static gateway are set. That's really it. So once you get those things set, you can just finish. It'll reboot. Kind of got to finish out of a few things here. And then we're going to pick this up from the iDRAC, log into our new iDRAC that is over here at the IP address that I showed you earlier, and that was .122. And your username at first on a reset system is root, and your password is Calvin. So you can, of course, change that after the fact. I'll give you a quick walkthrough in the next couple of minutes of your iDRAC interface and some things you want to change so you have a pretty smooth experience installing here. This gives you full control over everything. Like, this is a total KVM, so I know Jet KVM and stuff like that is pretty popular now. This is built into these servers. It's kind of one of the reasons that a lot of people really do like these a lot. So on Virtual Console Preview, click on that. From the dropdown for plugin type, select HTML5. If you don't select that, it's going to try to do some Java stuff. You don't want that. You want the full HTML5 viewer. Click on Apply. Now, this is super cool. This gives you all the settings, all the access, everything you could want. So if you go to your hardware and you come over and check your memory, you can see the memory you've got installed. You can see the CPUs you've got installed. Quick launch tasks on the server overview. Click Power On. It'll pop up a thing. Yep, there it goes. When you click this, launch, it should, the first time you do that, tell you, hey, you need to disable your pop-up blocker. So just go ahead, disable your pop-up blocker. Now, it looks like we just finished that download. Connect virtual media, and then we're going to map CD and select our ISO and click map device. Go ahead, close this down, and we're ready to go. So the next thing that we're going to do is just when we get to the boot selection menu, we're going to select the boot drive that we want, and that should be our virtual CD is what it'll be called. So if you hit F11 here, you can go to your BIOS boot manager. And when you check at this, it will tell us, there it is right there, that ADATA SU800NS38. That is our SSD that is in an M.2 format that we have added into that card. Really cool. Saves a lot of problems, especially on a system like this where you want to use your 14 terabyte drives. You don't want to sacrifice one for a boot drive. It's not an easy choice to make. So this makes that just a lot easier. And once you're in your boot menu, go ahead and click One Shot BIOS Boot Menu. And we're going to select our virtual optical drive. And this is, of course, our mapped ISO that we have. And so this is how you can get any ISO-based installation up and running on your R730XD with the iDRAC remote KVM functionality. Very cool stuff. If you wanted to follow along also with the complete new TrueNAS setup guide for beginners, that video we just dropped also, and we've got that linked in the description below, and you can follow along with that. I really think you should. It's a really great operating system, and they've made a lot of advancements recently, so very excited for you to watch that one also. Drop a comment below and let me know what operating system you're running. So let's go on and pick up from the BIOS, and I'm going to show you some of the settings that you need to have adjusted and addressed in the BIOS. We're also going to take a look at the wattage, the noise. We're going to do some price comparison and look at what it comes out to as far as the cost, and then I'm going to drop some conclusions. Let's continue on here. And I'll take you on a real quick tour of what your system BIOS looks like and what I've got mine set to. You don't really need to adjust too much in here. When you enter, you can click on your system BIOS, and this will take you to the submenu. You can click System Information to get an overview. Memory settings. Now, if you want to run a memory test, that does delay your boot up, but you should do this at least one time with your memory. And especially like I mentioned, if you can load all your RAM channels up, then run the memory test, that can make sure that all of your DIMMs, all of the slots are good. Not a bad idea. Leave your memory operating mode set to optimizer, and that is going to give you probably the best performance, what you expect performance. You can do things like mirroring and spare ECC and stuff like that, but I would not do that. Now, as far as node interleaving, you can click Enabled, and that will probably, for a dual socket system, provide you some of the best performance. And you can leave it set to Opportunistic Snoop Broadcast. This one can depend upon your workloads. So for that, definitely drop your knowledge if you have knowledge on it. But these are some difficult settings to get right. They do actually impact things like your bandwidth and your latency. So do know those do have some impacts potential on your system. Under your processor settings, it should look like this by default, and there may be some things you are interested in changing around here. I would recommend one thing you might want to make sure that you've got is your logical processor idling, and you get a little bit of a description, not a ton, but your logical processor idling, you may want to go ahead and enable that. Your X2 APIC mode, I don't know if TrueNAS is going to take advantage of that, so you can probably leave that just as it is. It'll give you, of course, some information about your processors that you've got installed, so you can verify they are what they say they are. Underneath SATA, you do need to make sure you are in AHCI mode, and do make sure that you have write cache disabled. Port I does have this, and you see a lot of ports. You might be wondering where those other SATA connectors are. So there's some SAS headers in there, and this is your onboard SAS that you can connect to drives. So for instance, if you get the 4 extra drive tray that goes in the middle, sits on top of where your processors are, you would want to make sure to come in here, check that out, make sure that everything looks, all those drives are presenting. Here's the one you're probably interested in, your boot settings. As you can see, we're in BIOS mode. I recommend most people be in BIOS mode unless you specifically need or know you need to be in UEFI mode. And if you go down here, you can see your boot hard drive boot sequence. And if you click this, you can see that we've got our embedded SATA port disk, and that is at the top. So if you select one and you want to change it around, you can hit plus or minus to change its location. Back out of that real quick. Integrated devices. So this one could be interesting if you want to run SRIOV for some of your devices. If you have some things that you wanted to split up, for instance, that could be something that you would do. And probably the most important one, well, okay, so memory mapped IO above 4G. So if you're running GPUs, make sure that's enabled. It should be enabled by default. Your slot disablement, we've got everything set to enabled, but if there was for some reason a device you did not want to boot from, you could set that there. This one here, slot bifurcation though. This is the default. This is how it'll look. The first riser has slots 1 through 3. Slot 4 and 5 are on riser 2. And riser 3, the one that's all the way at the end, is slot 6. So on slot 4 and on slot 6, you can have 4 by 4 by 4 by 4 bifurcation. So going back out here, you can leave your serial. Your system setting, I would recommend changing this to performance per watt OS instead of DAPC. This will give you a system managed noise profile also, which is much preferable to whatever the machine wants to run at. In most instances, it's also going to be quite accurate, and it's pretty decent performance also. Under system security, you could enable passwords if you wanted to. I would recommend you not unless you really are needing to, because that can create some problems for you in the future. Your system time you can make sure is up to date here. Everything else is pretty much the default, and the defaults are good. Once you've made your changes, click finish, click yes, click OK, and it'll take you back to your other menu where you could, if you wanted to, select your iDRAC settings. There are some interesting things in there. And your device settings are going to be basically your cards. If there is configuration you can do on like your NICs, this is one of the places, if you wanted to do PXE boot or something like that, you would go to configure that. So that's a pretty good overview of your BIOS on your R730XD. We'll click yes to confirm and exit out of that. Not a loud machine though. Like really not that loud. I'm actually going to show you guys what the noise profile looks like once we've fully booted into TrueNAS. For comparison, we're going to get the audio reading on the R720XD to compare it to the R730XD. I'm about a foot away from the front of it right here, and I'm going to stop so you can get a good measurement. And now let's go to the back. And this is about 9 inches away from the front. Not bad. So with our system up and running with our 12 drives in it, I hooked up the kilowatt with the splitter. You can see that we're right around 175 to 180 watts for 12 drives, 2 SSDs, an NVMe, and our CPU, and 128 gigabytes of RAM. Cables connected. Nice. And they're linking up. I'm going to transfer over some of the video files from this production. There are some pretty big files in this production, so that'll give us a really good shot at seeing what outside of 128 gigabytes our performance is like. It should maintain incredibly well. Under 128 gigabytes, being able to saturate and hit 10 gigabits per second is not going to be a real issue. And we're not going to test faster than 10 gigabits in this video, but make sure you hit like and subscribe, and do check out all the videos in the history because we have a ton of videos on going faster than 10 gigabits per second. Start this transfer here, and we'll just copy this, come over to our media share and paste. And you can see that we are doing pretty good here right off the bat, and in the 900 megabyte per second range, which is doing pretty good. Now we do see it falling down and picking back up as certain files complete and end, but a lot of those files are huge in size. Several of them are 20 to 25 gigabytes each. And if you're doing 4K video, this is something that is actually fairly common. And if you look over here, you can see the cache, the memory cache, kind of behaving as we would expect it to behave and shrinking down a little bit as we continue pushing things over. Now, 145, of course, is larger than 128. So at the tail end here, we should see something interesting, which is either we'll see the performance fall off dramatically, Or, much as I really hope this happens, we'll see that we actually are able to sustain the speed and just start writing directly to the disks, and theoretically, it should be able to keep up pretty easily with that. Yeah, we're almost to a gigabyte a second. So this is just 1500 MTU. Like I said, nothing special has been done. Everything super stock. Shows you what kind of performance you can get on an R730XD and TrueNAS just off the bat with very cheap 10 gigabit networking gear. And we're getting close to the free amount of memory up here closing out. So we're at about 19, 18 gigabytes left as we start hitting the disk directly. Okay, so you saw that drop down there into the 600s, 700s, but it's actually coming right back up. Yeah, we took a little bit of a performance hit there and really good. The response to get back up there is not quite as fast as when you're hitting just your DDR4. Of course, DDR4 has amazing low latency, much better than any platters could, but this is really good. I mean, that was a very good transfer. So overall, let's take a look at what the value proposition, the ongoing operation costs, and the electrical implications of having a 175 watt potential server would look like in a Homelab. And also, I didn't try to apply anything other than just the defaults because I think that's a very fair way to present things to people without little tips and tweaks and tricks and stuff like that. Those are good to add into other videos, but I'm not going to do it in the main video here, just in case you got one and you were thinking, well, how do I change something? Unless I tell you, you're not going to know. But the R730XD at about $200 is a pretty cool, compelling offer. It is not easy to find a place to stick 12 3.5-inch hard drives, or if you get the additional mid-plane caddy, an additional 4 for 16 total hard drives, 3.5-inch hard drive, 16 for $250. That's pretty cheap. And of course, if you omit the internal 4, you can basically be looking at somewhere around $200. The 14 terabyte hard drives is where your money goes, and hard drives are always going to be the most expensive thing in a storage server setup, and they probably should be. I don't like to, if it's data that I really care about, go super large as far as the size of the hard drive. The reason why is because if you have to basically have a drive fail out and bring a new drive in, that process to bring it in can take some time. And if you have more drives fail during that time, you're going to start sweating bullets. A RAID Z2 gives you the option to, if you can lose 2 drives and still be okay. That third drive, everything's gone. A RAID Z1, the first drive, you're okay. That second drive, everything's gone. So you can see that setting up a RAID Z2 has a lot of reasons, good reasons for doing it. And also, if you're looking at the resolver time, you want that to be as fast as possible. Basically added in all of that, that was $1,392 for 12 14 terabyte drives at about $116 a piece, which that was the best price per terabyte I could find. You can get decent-ish deals on larger sizes, and you can get pretty darn good deals at very, very small sizes like 4 terabytes and 6 terabytes. But whether or not you want to run that is a good question because your amount of actual space you're going to get is pretty low there. So I think it's a decent balance. If you're looking at 128 gigabytes of DDR4, that's actually not that expensive, and those are also 32 gigabyte DIMMs, so you can just populate one channel. That was better than actually I had with my 16 gigabyte DIMMs. So 85 bucks is a really decent price for those. I added in the rails just because this system that I was demonstrating had the rails on it, so I thought it was a fair comparison to do. And I added in the 2 800 gigabyte SAS SSDs. I really do like those, and I think that if you can find a way to run them, even if you don't end up going with this, you would like them as well. The SSD plus NVMe carrier kind of combo that I showed you, which allows you to have your boot drive not occupy one of your very valuable bays, that is a pretty cheap little dude at $10, it looks like now. The app drive NVMe and the boot drive SSD total added like $15 and $25 a piece. And I would strongly recommend going with an Intel 2695 V4 instead of a 2696 or a 2699. Of course, you're going to get substantially better performance out of the largest ones, but they're also going to cost a bit more. And it's not enough of a substantial performance benefit, in my opinion, to make it make sense. You tell me. But all total, this is about $2,000 for this build. And we'll take a look at also kind of like what that ongoing operations cost looks like. I have a few alternative parts. If you went with 10 terabyte hard drives, that would be about $1,000 in hard drives and about $1,556. So you can change the math there and do that if you want to. Of course, there is the ongoing cost of electric. And so I put together a chart here. Of course, all this stuff, digitalspaceport.com. And it looks at the price per kilowatt hour at USD rates, 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, and 0.5. So that would be like 10 cents to 50 cents per kilowatt hour. And at an annual rate of 175 watts with 24/7, 365 operation, that's actually something you could or you could opt not to do. You might be trading off if you're shutting down quite frequently. And ZFS, of course, keeping your drive spinning. It is kind of the optimal state for the drives themselves. So it's not like you're doing them harm by keeping them running. As a matter of fact, frequent on and off is probably much more harmful to them. But you can see at 10 cents per kilowatt hour, the annual running cost is about $153. The monthly, $12.78. Daily, that's about 58 cents. That's really not that bad. However, if you go up to 20 cents, you're adding in an additional substantial amount of cost, coming in at about $306. And that does definitely impact you. If you're looking at 30 cents per kilowatt hour, well, I think you've got to start being really careful about how much money you're spending and how many watts you're spending especially, because then you would be looking at about $460 annually. And at $1.73 a day, that's not cheap. At 40 cents and 50 cents, you tell me in the comments below how you live, because God bless you. It's going to be hard out there with those kind of electric rates. Now, if you look at the ongoing costs of year 1 and year 2, I think this is where you see the value in having your own storage server. And for most people, this makes a lot of sense, comes in. And so this also needs to be broken down by your kilowatt hour rate, because you factor in your electric costs as ongoing operational costs. So your first year operational cost for this, including the cost of buying the unit and the first year electric for the unit, comes in at $2,081 at 10 cents per kilowatt hour, all the way up the gradient to $2,694. That is at, of course, 50 cents per kilowatt hour. So that is a first year cost that's pretty big. If you look at the price per terabyte for year 1, that is $17.94 per terabyte for year 1, and all the way up to $23.23 per terabyte for 50 cents per kilowatt hour. Now, the cool thing happens in year 2, when essentially, if you were looking at the cost that you would have to be spending in an ongoing basis, I mean, this is a lot of terabytes of storage. If you were buying 116 or 115 terabytes in the cloud, it's not going to be anywhere close to this if you're going with top tier places. If you're going with some mid-range or some very low-end box stuff, then yeah, you could bring the cost down quite a bit. But still, if you're looking at, the bigger storage providers, storage is not cheap. Your second year cost, though, is where I think you really start seeing it. So there's a reason why I bring second year costs into this, and why I think you should consider second year costs as well. So your second year costs at about $153. You're back to essentially just your operating cost of electric. If there is some maintenance items that need to be upgraded, or if you just add some additional things, you would of course add them into that cost. But that brings your price per terabyte for year 2 of operations to $1.32. That is pretty cool. And that is actually really wickedly affordable. And even on the high side at $6.61, if you had 50 cents per kilowatt hour electric rates, that's, I wouldn't say that's great, but it could be worse. It definitely could be worse. The cloud on top tier providers definitely would be worse. And I think this points to a good reason that you should consider things like this, not a short-term project, but a multi-year project. And I wouldn't set up a storage server or recommend somebody set up a storage server unless it was something they were needing in an ongoing fashion and they knew they needed it for a period of time. That's probably you if you're watching this video, but let me know your use cases down below. Also, you don't have to fill up all of your drives at the same time. You can fill them up in logical groupings of 4 in RAID Z1s and actually add on as you go through and grow up to 4 times. And you don't have to start with 128 gigabytes of DDR4 either. Although I've got to say, if you're transferring some pretty big files over, you're gonna like having a lot of RAM. It is essentially what makes ZFS and TrueNAS really capable for things like online editing. If you have low latency fiber connections especially, then you can really get some great performance when you're doing things like loading thousands of thumbnails, scrubbing your timelines, or a lot of other tasks. And setting up the way that I went through today with you is a good way to get to that. So, as far as conclusions, I think the R730XD is an exciting server. And like I mentioned, it is hard to find a place to stick 12 hard drives for 200 bucks. It does offer a lot of options also that are pretty cool for customizing, and you can get 2 GPUs running in it also. That's pretty cool. That's not something you're going to get in every single other system out there. You would need to upgrade your PSUs for that. You may need to upgrade your power board. I'm not exactly sure on this one whether you do or not, but those are some considerations that you would want to make. Of course, check out the article. I'm going to be adding a lot more to this article also, so by the time you read it, it's going to have a tremendous amount of additional options and ideas for good use cases and what I think this system stands out for. And I hope you have a good rest of the day. Let me know, like I said, what your current setup is looking like. Are you a Team TrueNAS player? Are you on RAID? Are you a Proxmoxer? Are you just bare metal? Are you on the forbidden Windows with your storage just running maybe without mirrors? Let me know in the comments below. And while you're down there, be sure to hit like and subscribe. Do check out the complimentary video that we released at the same time for this also if you are new and a beginner, because it explains step by step how you can go through, set up, get your TrueNAS running. I walk you through the entire interface. We set up a system and I showcase setting up shares, everything, so you can walk away with a full server. I hope you had a great time and look forward to reading your comments. Check you out next time.